So when we ended the last video, I was asking you, we were talking about proportional representation. Again, the idea behind proportional representation is that the larger the population in a state, the more representatives the state is going to get in the legislature. And so I'd ask you to go ahead and decide, or think about it, who gets, the example that I gave was California and Wyoming. California has 53 representatives because our population is pretty large. Wyoming has a very small population, even with my daughter living there. Now it's gone from, I think, 12 people to 13 people or something like that. But there's only a few, maybe 8 people, went up to 9. I don't remember. They only have one representative in our House of Representatives. And our House of Representatives is based on proportional representation. So the question I asked was, which state, in that kind of setting, which state benefits? Do large states benefit or do small states benefit? And I wanted you to circle one of those to decide for yourself who benefits, large states or small states. And the answer is large states, right? The large states get more people, more representatives. And so if you're Virginia and there's a legislative branch and it's based on proportional representation, you're going to get a bunch of representatives. If you're New Jersey and your population is very small, you're going to only get a few representatives. So the people from, the representatives from Virginia are going to be able to outvote you all the time. So now let's move on to the upper house. In the upper house, in the Virginia plan, the way it was supposed to work is that the people who were in the upper house were going to be chosen or appointed by the state legislators. Now what that means is that it would be like in our system, if instead of us electing our senators, right, if instead of electing our senators, what happened is the people in Sacramento, our representatives in Sacramento, if they elected our senators, that was the system that the New Jersey plan envisioned, right? So whereas we got to vote in the Virginia plan, we would get to vote directly for our representatives. The sun's moving again, so I got to move one more time. Move the table. Move myself. There we go. So, where was I? So if the people in Sacramento went ahead and elected our representatives, that's called an indirect election. Okay, so we have a direct election. That's when we vote directly for the people who are running for office. A direct election. An indirect election is where we vote for people, like our state legislatures, and then they get to select somebody else to represent us. So we get to vote for our state legislators, the people who are in Sacramento, and if they were electing our senators, we would call that indirect. So if we get to vote directly for our representative, then it's a direct election. But if we vote for our legislators, and then our legislators select our senator, we call that an indirect election, because it's not going from us directly to them, it's going from us to them, and then down to there. There's pretty good graphics for my garden at 7:30 in the morning, right? You followed this whole thing? Very good. Okay, so proportional representation again. The upper house was going to be based on proportional representation. They were going to be appointed by the state legislators. Now, we had this conversation once before. Who benefits? The large states or the small states if the upper house is based on proportional representation. And once again, I want you to circle one of the two. The large states or the small states. And the answer is, you want to say it out loud? We'll say it together. Just kidding. The large states. Okay? The large states are the ones that benefit. Now, if you think about it, in a way that makes sense. It's the Virginia plan, right? Virginia's going to write a plan that's going to help out Virginia. Why not? You know, they want to benefit. They want to win. I'm sure they're not going to be totally selfish about it, but at least they're going to set it up so that in the legislature, they're going to be the ones that benefit. And so that makes sense. So that's how they set it up. Why do they benefit? They're a large state. They have a large population. And the way it's going to work is large states like Virginia are going to have more representation in both the lower house and the upper house than a state like New Jersey. Now, let's see what they envisioned. Let's talk about what they envisioned for the executive branch in the Virginia plan. In the executive branch, they were going to have what was called a plural executive. A plural executive. What that means is that there was going to be more than one person who was the president. Essentially, think of the president as not being one person, but a committee, 5 people. And if the president has to make a decision, well, this group has to make a decision together. They have to come to some sort of agreement. That's called a plural executive, more than one, plural. Right now, we have a singular executive. We only have one president, President Obama. We have one. But if there were 5 people who made up the executive branch, or the president, then and anytime they had to make a decision, they had to vote, and whichever one got a majority, like 3-2 or 4-1 or 5-0, that would be the decision. That's exactly what the Virginia plan envisioned. A plural executive, not a singular, a plural executive. And the citizens weren't going to vote for the president. That wasn't the way they set it up. The way they wanted it to happen was that the president would be selected by Congress. Now, maybe you figured this out already, but think about this for a second. And if you have to, pause this and go back and look at your other notes. Congress, in the lower house, who basically wins in the lower house? Who gets the advantage because it's based on proportional representation? The large states. In the upper house, who has the advantage? The large states. Well, if the Congress, both the upper house and the lower house, are going to be the ones who go ahead and select the president, well, who's going to have the advantage? Who's going to have the upper hand when it comes to selecting the president? Again, circle your little things, either large state or small state, and then I'll give you the answer. Probably obvious, maybe not. The large states. Well, now Virginia's getting a little greedy, okay? Because here they've got it set up where they win in the legislature, and then because they have the advantage in the legislature because they have more representatives, now they're in their plan, they go ahead and they have it be that the legislature goes ahead and picks the president, right? That's like, okay. Well, what did they have in mind for the judicial branch? In the judicial branch, what they said, and again, as you guys hopefully know or remember, the judicial branch, the courts, that's just what the courts are. In the judicial branch, what they went ahead and decided was that judges would be appointed for life, which is our system, the way we have our system now. The judges would be appointed for life. And how would they be selected? Well, as you may know, in our current system, the president nominates a judge, and then the Senate either approves or doesn't approve the judge. In the Virginia plan, the judges are going to be appointed for life, and they were going to be selected by Congress. Now, we've been here before. Who benefits? Who has the advantage? In this case, the large states or the small states? Once again, the large states. So the way Virginia set this up, they have the advantage in the large states. In the legislative branch, they have the advantage in the executive branch, and they have the advantage in the judicial branch. They have the advantage in each one of them. Okay? So, returning back to the very beginning of our very first lecture, if we think about the struggle over the allocation of benefits and privileges, politics, right? According to the Virginia plan, who are the winners going to be? Circle one of them. And who are the losers going to be? And circle one of those. And I'll give you a second while I sip my coffee, because it's still pretty cold, although the sun's coming up, so it's getting quite nice. But I'm like right behind the telephone pole. Actually, it's a street light. Well, hopefully, for the winners, you said the large states were the winners, and the small states were the losers. Now, if this is not clear, and if you're not sure about why that is the case, write this down, because this is exactly something that we can talk about when we do the review session. Okay? So be sure to write this stuff down, the things that you don't understand. Now, we're not going to do the writing exercise that's in the notes, but I think it's a good idea. I would say, here's what I want you to do. Go ahead and write out an answer. If you look on your lecture notes, it said, how would you explain to an elementary school student why the Virginia plan benefited the large states more than the small states? I think this is it seems like a dumb exercise, but it's actually really hard. It's really hard to do because, when you're explaining something to a kid, a small kid, you have to use very simple terms. And sometimes it's a really, you're talking about, you can write, about proportional representation. That's kind of complicated. So you have to break it down for kids, for little kids, so that they understand it. So here's what I'd say. Go ahead and write that out. And during the review session, I may ask you to go ahead and read your answer to that question. Okay? And that will, and I guarantee you, that will help you prepare for the exam. So we're going to stop here, and we'll move on to the next section of the lecture as soon as I can find the mouse so I can stop this section.